There are dynamics in Washington right now this week that are critically important that I don't think a lot of people are focused on. Obviously, people know that there's some kind of a bill out there and there's some kind of negotiations and the Senate's coming back, and what does all that mean? Here's what it means. If this negotiation can be completed in a manner that both sides can live with, and we can have another vote. We had one vote that went down. Republicans opposed the supplemental legislation because they wanted to have policy changes about border security, which I think is worthy of a lot of review and scrutiny. And I certainly support what they're trying to do to come to a resolution. But what's missed in all this is this bill will provide dollars for Ukraine so they can defeat Vladimir Putin. If we don't provide this money to Ukraine, it is highly likely, if not a certainty, that Vladimir Putin will prevail. That's bad for all of us. It's bad for the world. It's bad for democracy. So for that reason alone, this bill should pass. But then when you add in the support for Israel in its efforts to destroy Hamas, as they should, that there's billions of dollars for Israel. What's missed in all the debates about this is the money for the new funding for border security that's additional on top of the existing appropriations. For example, last year, when we had an appropriations vote at the end of the year, right around this time of the year, right before Christmas, the federal government, just in a couple of line items, was spending, when you add up Border Patrol and ICE and a few other elements, was spending a little less than $30 billion on that, which is a lot of money. But a lot of people voted against that appropriations bill, claiming for other reasons they wanted to vote against it. But in addition to those tens of billions for border security that are in place now because of last year's spending bill, we still have this year's spending bill to get to in January and February, we can add to that in this bill roughly another $14 billion on top of existing appropriations just for border security. Funding for the Department of Homeland Security, funding for the Department of Justice, funding for Health and Human Services, all these agencies that have some role in border security. The thing that I'm most focused on right now, in addition to supporting all that money for more Border Patrol, more personnel at the border to enforce the laws relating to border security, what I'm focused on mostly is fentanyl. If we pass this bill, there'll be two major elements in it that will be really good for the fight against fentanyl. You know, you have precursor chemicals coming from China that go to Mexican drug cartels, and then the fentanyl is sent to this country. Usually not in the pockets of or on the person of a human being. Usually the fentanyl comes into this country through cargo and vehicles at ports of entry. So we got to do something about it. This bill provides a lot of money to focus on stopping fentanyl at ports of entry. The main feature of which is a little more than $1 billion for these so-called non-intrusive inspection machines. And the president proposed in his version of it, and our bill won't be much different than this, about 100 of these new units, so that when a vehicle comes across the border, when a piece of cargo comes across the border, but especially in vehicles, this technology can find the fentanyl. They found it in tires and in compartments, in all kinds of places. They can stop a lot of the fentanyl. It's not a magic wand, but it'll do a hell of a good job of reducing the fentanyl coming into this country. So that's part one of the stop fentanyl part of this bill that I hope we can get a vote on again this week. And this vote should be successful if we can get to it. The second part of the bill, and this is a little complicated, but it bears explanation, is the fend off fentanyl legislation, which is overwhelmingly bipartisan, came out of the Banking Committee. Senator Brown, Senator Tim Scott, got this bill out of the committee. It's got overwhelming support. I'm one of the co-sponsors, like a lot of people in both parties. The idea was, well, if we want to stop fentanyl, we want to get tougher on those who are in the business of pushing fentanyl across the world. We got to get tougher on money laundering, and we've got to sanction more transnational criminal organizations and direct the president, not optional, direct the president of the United States to sanction these organizations. So it has a lot of good features on sanctioning and anti-money laundering. That bill, that overwhelmingly bipartisan fend-off fentanyl bill, was attached to the National Defense Authorization Act, so-called NDA, the big defense bill, right? That bill passed this week, but guess what was left out of it? The fend-off fentanyl bill. Republicans in the House, I don't know why the hell they did this, but they took the fend-off fentanyl bill, they pulled it out of the National Defense Bill, and so there's no bill now that's part of that defense bill that's already passed. What our side did in the Senate is we said, look, we got this big supplemental bill for Ukraine, for Israel. I didn't mention humanitarian support before. That's about $9 billion. So if you support humanitarian support, you damn well should support this bill. But it also has the new border security money for fentanyl and a lot of other border security funding. We attached the fend-off fentanyl legislation to this bill. So you can make a very compelling argument that as important as this bill is for Israel, for Ukraine, for humanitarian support, and for border security generally, if all you were worried about was fentanyl, you can make an argument that this supplemental legislation is the single most important anti-fentanyl bill in American history. At least I'll make that argument, because it has the fend-off fentanyl bill embedded into it, and it also has all this new money for this new inspection technology that we can deploy at the border. You know, the Homeland Security Secretary back at the end of October, I think it was October 31st, did an op-ed in the Washington Post, and he described in the first paragraph or two what was happening at one particular, I forget the port of entry, but one particular port of entry, that they had this technology to find the fentanyl. But it was old technology on the back of a pickup truck, and that's all they had for that port of entry. We should have whatever we need, whether it costs $1 billion to have this inspection equipment, or $2 billion, whatever it costs, we should put it there at those ports of entry where all the fentanyl's coming in there. It's not some guy walking across the border with a package of fentanyl in his pocket. It's coming through the ports of entry, and it's coming through cargo and vehicles. We've got to stop it there. And if you want to stop fentanyl, we don't need your speech, we don't need your hot air, we don't need tough talk. We need the damn money. You need the funding to stop fentanyl. And that's why this bill is essential. It's the most important bill we could vote on to stop fentanyl, because of both the legislation on anti-money laundering and sanctioning, and because of the funding for this new technology.